Welcome Americans. My name is President Barack Hussein Obama. Today, I'm going to explain the national debt, and why you don't need to worry about it. To help us understand the national debt, I have invited noted economist, Harry Klaproth. Now Harry, can you explain to us exactly what the national debt is?
The national debt is the amount of money that the United States owes to creditors at any point in time.
That sounds simple. I remember criticizing President Bush for the amount of debt he had incurred during his presidency.
That's correct. Do you remember how much President Bush added to the national debt during his administration?
No. But I was told it was a lot.
That's correct, Mr. President. When President Bush took office in 2000, the national debt stood at $6 trillion. When he left office, the national debt had grown to $10 trillion. That was an increase of over $4 trillion in 8 years, or more than 50%.
Wow. That's a lot of money. In fact, that is unpatriotic. It's no wonder that the American voters elected me. I remember that I promised to cut the deficit.
Yes, Mr. President. You said during the campaign that that was unpatriotic. However, since you were elected, do you know how much the national debt has increased?
No. But it couldn't have been much. At least, it couldn't have increased as much as under President Bush.
In just 5 years, under your brilliant leadership, the national debt has increased $7 trillion. That's almost twice as much as under President Bush, and, Mr. President, you managed to accomplish that in just 5 years. In another 3 years the debt is projected to increase to $20 trillion. That means that you will have doubled the national debt during your administration. To put that in perspective, in just 8 years, you will have added more debt than was added since this country was founded over 230 years ago. And, that, Mr. President, is unpatriotic.
Okay. So the national debt has gone up a little bit under my administration. However, my staff tells me that as long as China is willing to loan us money it won't be a problem. They also tell me that, as long as the Federal Reserve continues to print money, that everything will turn out okay.
Really, Mr. President? How much longer do you think that China will be willing to loan us money? Do you realize that we never really pay down our debt? We simply roll it over. Would you loan money to a company who was never going to pay it back?
I would if it was someone else's money. I loaned the taxpayers' money to General Motors and Solyndra and I knew they were bad investments. The taxpayers lost $500 million on Solyndra and over $10 billion on government, General Motors. But what the heck, I helped my political cronies and bailed out the unions. Do you realize that I even broke the rule of law and screwed the Chrysler bondholders so that I could save the union pensions? That's how politics works. At least that's the way it works in Chicago. Your political cronies come first, and to hell with the taxpayers.
But, Mr. President, don't you realize that you and your liberal agenda are going to bankrupt this country?
Oh, come on now. Our country can never go bankrupt as long as the Fed is willing to print money.
And that is exactly what the Fed has been doing. Do you realize, Mr. President, that the Fed has increased the money supply by 4 times what it was when you took office?
Really? Do you think that's where my Obama stash came from? Is that why I have been able to give people free cell phones, and was able to increase the number of people on food stamps by 67%? From 28 million when I took office to 47 million people today? By the end of my term we'll have over half the people in this country completely dependent on the government. I'll bet that's why I beat Romney in the last election, because I care.
But, if you really cared, Mr. President, you would not want to make our children and grandchildren pay for our financial mismanagement. If you really cared, Mr. President, you would cut spending and reduce the deficit. If you really cared you would stop throwing taxpayer money away on bailouts of your cronies. If you really cared, you would stop the Fed from printing vast amounts of money which will result in inflation like they had in Germany in the 1930s. If you really cared, Mr. President, you would work with Congress to develop a balanced budget. The problem is that you don't care. The only thing you care about is getting re-elected. And the only way you can get re-elected is to give more money to your cronies and make more people dependent on the government. And, I've only skimmed the surface of our financial problems. We still need to discuss the massive unfunded liabilities which are 10 times as large as the national debt.
Oh no you don't. We are not going to talk about the unfunded liabilities. If the American public were ever told the truth about this, they would tar and feather all of us. Listen. I've had enough of this. You conservatives don't care about anyone but yourselves. You want dirty air, dirty water, and you want the old people to just die. I'm just trying to redistribute the wealth to the poor people, so they will become dependent on the Democrats, which will ensure we get re-elected. If you conservatives don't like that, you just need to leave. I've heard that you want to secede from the Union. Go ahead. See if I care. We don't need you anyway.
Great. If you don't need us anymore, we are now free to form a more perfect union. We'll form a new government founded on the Constitution, as originally envisioned by the Founding Fathers. We'll restore the rights of the people and the states. We'll constitutionally limit the size of the government. Spending and the national debt will be limited to 10% of the gross national product. We'll have a flat tax of 15% with a $10,000 deduction for each taxpayer. There will be no other deductions and no tax credits for individuals or businesses. We'll virtually eliminate the IRS tax code. The government will no longer be able to take private property to protect endangered species. There will be a reasonable balance between the environment and the economy. Then, you bleeding heart liberals will be left to self-destruct. If you want more information on secession and what the new country will look like, go to secednowusa.com. This is the most comprehensive website on secession. It covers the right to secede, reasons for secession, and what the new country will look like. Please tell all your friends. We need to take action now, before the United States implodes.